Hi everyone, it's Laura here, and today I'm really excited to be joining the celebration for Justine Hovey's 50k subscribers here on YouTube. I am sharing two different cards with my favorite technique, which is blending with distress inks and oxides, and there will also be prizes and giveaways, so stay tuned because I'll let you all guys know more as the video goes by. Before showing you the cards, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the different tools that you can use for ink blending. As I said, I am really in love with my distress inks and my distress oxides. These aren't the only inks that you can blend with, but are my go-to at the moment. I have the distress oxides. These are available only in the full size, whereas distress inks are available in a larger size, but also in these mini ink cubes, which is the ones I have because they're really practical. They don't take a lot of space and I can store them in these very handy tins. The tools you can use for ink blending are some blending foams. These ones here are by Ranger, both the tool and the foam itself. The foams attach to the tool via some Velcro, and I have one foam per color and 4 blenders in total. Then you have daubers like this jumbo dauber by scrapbook.com, and also you have finger daubers. These are also by scrapbook.com and they're very useful for tiny details or for very intricate stencils. You can also use some brushes to blend your distress inks and oxides. These again are by scrapbook.com and I am very happy with the soft look you get with them. I also have the Ranger ones, which are a little bit smaller, and I have this very nice and clever opening which is similar to makeup brushes too. And speaking of makeup brushes, there is another type of brushes that I don't have yet but have been very popular. One example is the ones by Picket Fence, and I will have a link to that in the description box below too. And lastly, I just wanted to mention that the paper I use when I do ink blending is this Bristol Smooth Cardstock by Strathmore. This has some sort of a smooth coating on top, which lets you get very nice and smooth blends, and I really recommend it for ink blending. Alright, so after this brief introduction to distress inks and oxides and the tools you can use, let's go ahead and have a look at the first card that I made today. This is a scene card that I created with products by Fawn and my favorite things. And I started by creating some snowy hills, and for that I die cut some Bristol Smooth cardstock with the Fawn large stitched rectangle Stackables dies and my favorite things stitched snowdrifts Die-namics. And I'm going to do some ink blending with distress oxides. For this card here I used distress oxides, and for the next one I used distress inks. The color I'm using right now is Spun Sugar, and I chose to do some ink blending using my blending brushes by scrapbook.com because I want to get a really nice and soft blend from pink to white. And I find that brushes help you achieve this soft look much more easily than blending foams. I'm starting by applying the ink from the edge of the cardstock inwards so that I get a nice and smooth blend and I don't get any harsh lines. And then, once my hues were nicely shaded, I went ahead and started working on my sky. I die cut some more Bristol Smooth cardstock with that same stitched rectangle die by Fawn, and this time I'm using my foam blenders to add my distress oxides. The colors that I chose are Picked Raspberry, Worn Lipstick, and Spun Sugar. And the reason why I'm using foam blenders this time is that I'm going to cover a larger area and it's easier for me at least to use foam blenders for that. I'm going to go back and forth between colors wherever two different shades meet so that I can blend that transition nicely and get a smooth gradient between the two. And I'm using circular motions with my hand to apply my inks. Once my ink blending was done, I used the My Favorite Things Snowfall stencil together with my Nuvo Glimmer paste in the color Moonstone to add the effect of a snowfall on my sky. The bottom part of the panel doesn't have any ink there because it will be hidden behind the hues. And this glimmer paste is an absolute must-have in my opinion, especially for winter and Christmas cards because of this beautiful glitter it adds. But you know, glitter is pretty at any season, right? So this is really a staple in my craft room, and actually my jar is almost over, so I should replace it. The next element for my card is the moon. And for that, I'm going to do some ink blending. I don't know why for this one I used distress inks. I guess I was a little bit distracted, but either way you could use distress ink or oxides. This one here is in the color pumice tone. And because I have a small die cut and I want to add some fine detail, I'm going to use a finger dauber. You can see I have also this nice and handy little case there where I keep all of them. I started by adding some shading to one side of the die cut, and then I tapped my finger lightly in the center to create some texture and make the moon look slightly more realistic. And next, once I was done blending my moon, I started working on my images, which are part of the Yeti or Not and the Winter Village stamp sets by Fawn. I stamped them with black ink. This is black alcohol-proof ink by Spectrum Noir on some Neenah Solar White 110 pounds cardstock, and then I quickly colored them with my Illustrator markers. I don't want to go into the details of coloring too much because this video is more about ink blending, but I did want to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about the video hop. So today we are celebrating Justine Hovey's 50,000 subscribers milestone. It's such an incredible milestone, but so deserved. Justine is so talented and really a great teacher, and I'm really happy to be joining the party today. Along the hop you will find over 50 card examples with different techniques. We are all sharing our favorite, so there will be a lot to learn and a lot of inspiration too. And Justine is very generously giving away 5 $50 gift certificate. The winner will be able to choose between either scrapbook.com or Ellen Hudson, and the winners will be selected among the comments to all the videos in the hop, so the more you watch and comment, the higher your chances to win. The winners will be chosen randomly and will be announced on Justine's blog on October the 15th, so make sure to leave a comment down below and let me know what your favorite technique is. And speaking of techniques, if you'd like to learn more, you can consider subscribing to Justine's Technique Resource Binder class. There you will learn a lot of interesting card making techniques, and Justine is a great teacher, so I highly recommend you checking it out. You will find a link to the class in the description box down below, and there you will also find a list of supplies that I used, a link to Justine's channel and blog, and to the next stop in the hop. One more piece of information before we get back to the card. Today also marks the beginning of the scrapbook.com World Card Making Day sales, so there will be very great deals on card making supplies on scrapbook.com. And I will have a link to the sales page in the description box down below too. I suggest you check it out because there might or might not be freebies too. Back to the card. At this point I had all my elements ready and the glimmer paste was completely dry, so I could go ahead and start assembling my scene. I first adhered the two hues together and then I glued them down onto my sky. I lined the corners as well as I could, and for that I used some Nuvo Deluxe adhesive because it gives me a little bit of wiggle time to move things in place. Next up, I dressed up my Yetis with a hat and a scarf, and then I started gluing down the houses on the back of the hue. I adhered also some of the trees in the front of the hue in the background to create a little bit of depth in my scene, and then I adhered the Yetis and one of the trees on the front hue. I completed the card front with a sentiment from the Winter Village stamp set by Fawn that I stamped on the foreground hue using Memento dewdrops in the color Rosebud. You could also use Distress Oxide in Picked Raspberry if you wanted to, but I had this in my stash and it matched really nicely with the color palette that I have on my card. Some finishing touches with a Spectrum Noir clear overlay pen to add a little bit of shimmer to the snow on the trees and on the houses too. And then I mounted everything on a top folding A2 card base. This measures 5.5 inches by 8.5 inches and was scored at 4.25 inches. And then, because I had 2 leftover images and nothing goes to waste in card making, I decorated the inside of my card too. And that finished off my card number 1 for today. My next card is also a Christmas card, but this time we're going under the sea and we're going to use distress inks and a couple of different techniques than the ones that I have shown before, which was basic ink blending with different tools. This time I'm going to show you how to do masked ink blending and also how to blend distress inks over stencils. To start off, I stamped my images on some Bristol Smooth cardstock with VersaFine Onyx black ink, and I'm going to heat emboss them with clear embossing powder. You saw that I did some second generation stamping, which means I used the ink left on my stamps to stamp the images again on some masking paper. I'm going to explain that in a moment, but for now I just wanted to say that I went ahead and also stamped the face of the little octopus with some more VersaFine Onyx black ink. And I also stamped some water bubbles with Versamark ink. This is a clear sticky ink. And I'm going to emboss everything again with clear embossing powder by Wow and melt the embossing powder with my heat gun. Next, I cut out my masks using my EK Success Cutter B scissors. I'm using some repositionable packaging labels because they are low tack and they are rather inexpensive, and I'm using that to create all my masks actually when I do masked stamping. I'm going to use these masks to protect my images, so once I'm done cutting them out, I'm going to adhere them on top of the stamped images so that when I go ahead and blend my inks over this panel, I will not blend the inks over the images and those will be left white. That's a lot of words to explain a pretty simple concept, which I think the video is showing well enough. But if you have questions, always feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Once my masks are all in place, I can go ahead and start doing my ink blending. I'm going to use 2 different stencils by my favorite things. This one here is called Drifts and Hues, and I'm going to use it to create a little sandbank at the bottom of my scene. I'm going to blend distress inks in Vintage Photo and Antique Linen at the bottom to create a little bit of shading and dimension. And I'm using my Ranger blending brushes because I feel like it's a little bit easier not to lift off the masks when you use brushes rather than blending foams, and also because I'm going to blend the scene towards white, so I'm not going to blend the inks over the entire panel. I felt I had a little bit more control and I was going to be able to create a smoother blend using blending brushes. For my ocean background, I am using distress inks in the colors Cracked Pistachio, Peacock Feathers, Mermaid Lagoon, and Blueprint Sketch, and the stencil that I'm using is the My Favorite Things Make Waves stencil. I am shifting it and using different edges of the stencil to create a little bit of variation in the waves on my background. And I'm going to start with my lightest distress ink, which is the Cracked Pistachio at the top. Moving on then to Peacock Feathers, Mermaid Lagoon, and I'm going to have the Blueprint Sketch, which is my darkest distress ink, at the bottom of the scene. Also in this case, like I did with my foam blenders, I'm using circular motions with my hand, and I'm starting to apply the ink from the stencil, and then I'm going to move upwards towards my paper. And I'm going to slowly fill in the scene. And by the way, I also used a mask to mask off the ink blended sandbank, again using those repositionable packaging labels where I traced the profile of the hue with a pen and then I trimmed the mask out with my scissors again. Once I was done in blending, I could peel off my masks and review the images, which you can see are nice and pristine, thanks to the masks that we used, and I started doing some coloring. This time I used my Z-Cling Color View Brush markers because I'm working on Bristol Smooth cardstock and they happen to blend really nicely on this type of paper. These are water-based markers in case you're not familiar with them, and you can blend them with water or with each other. Because I wanted a nice and bright look this time around, I didn't use any water to blend them out, but I used 2 shades per color and I blended them with each other. I tried to keep the color palette pretty limited with the traditional Christmas green and red, and then I added some yellows and oranges and some pinks too. And as you will have seen by now, you have the colors of the markers that I used listed on screen. By the way, I just realized I never said the name of the stamp set that I used. This is the Fawn Christmas Fish stamp set. The sentiment is part of the same set, and I heat embossed it with white embossing powder over some black cardstock that I then die cut with one of the dies in the Fawn Double Surprise Slider die set. I adhered everything to a top folding A2 card base cut at 4 1/4 by 11 inches and scored at 5 1/2 inches, and that finished off card number 2. And that's it for today. Don't forget that this video is part of a hop with giveaways and that the more you comment, the higher your chances to win. So remember to leave a comment in the description box down below. If you did enjoy the video, you can give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here, welcome, and I hope you stick around by subscribing to my channel for more card making and paper crafting inspiration. Thank you all so much for stopping by and have a great day.